We'll get started just saying hello to everybody. Welcome to the town hall with federal opposition. My name is Dan Prue. I'm the general manager with the Greater Vernon Chamber of Commerce, and we're pleased to be joined by all of you today. And with these two gentlemen here, proud to be able to offer these types of town halls for our members to give you an opportunity to have a voice and be able to address your issues and concerns to your elected officials. And I will go ahead and introduce these gentlemen with us today. So we have in alphabetical order, MP Mel Arnold. And Mel Arnold was first elected as Member of Parliament for North Okanagan Shuswap in October of 2015 and re-elected in October of 2019. MP Arnold served as Shadow Minister for Fisheries, Oceans, and Canadian Coast Guard from November 2019 to August 2020. He was elected as Vice Chair of the Parliamentary Standing Committee for Fisheries in February of 2020. MP Arnold also served as Deputy Shadow Minister for Fisheries and the Vice Chair of the BC Yukon Conservative Caucus during the 42nd Parliament. Prior to being elected, MP Arnold operated a business and was an active community volunteer. And MP Pat Kelly was first elected as Member of Parliament for Calgary Rocky Ridge in October 2015 and was re-elected in October 2019. MP Kelly is currently the Shadow Cabinet Minister for Small Business and Western Economic Development and previously served as Shadow Minister for National Revenue, Associate Shadow Minister for Finance, and Deputy Critic for Treasury Board. MP Kelly currently serves on the Standing Committee on Finance and has also served on the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy, and Ethics, and the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Prior to being elected, he worked as a mortgage broker and was the co-owner of a brokerage. I need a glass of water now. Thank you again, gentlemen, for joining us. I really appreciate it. We are scheduled to go till 12 o'clock today or until we're through all the questions being asked from our members and attendees. And I will give you both the opportunity for opening statements. We'll give you 3 minutes and we'll start again in alphabetical order with you, MP Arnold. Oh, you're on mute.
Yep, too many buttons. Thank you, Dan, and thanks to the Chamber for hosting MP Pat Kelly and myself today. It's an opportunity for us to hear from the Chamber members. Certainly some concerns out there. It's an honor to have MP Kelly with us here today with his background in some of the shadow ministry portfolios he's held. Certainly been holding the government accountable on programs that have been rolling out and so on. And I've been doing outreach as well throughout the riding here, the North Okanagan Shuswap, as I've spoken before. It's a large riding. We have 9 or 10 chambers of commerce throughout the riding. So it's a valuable opportunity for me to hear what are the issues on the ground, and that's really what's important to MP Kelly and myself, is taking what we hear from events like this back to Ottawa so that we can advocate on behalf of what the constituents out here have as their concerns, and they are certainly varied. And even the Greater Vernon Chamber of Commerce has businesses from outlying rural areas that come that belong to the Chamber for various reasons. So all of the issues that come in are certainly varied and widespread, but there are some commonalities as well. And I think we'll get to that probably in some of the questions that we'll probably hear today. So I just again want to thank Dan, you at the Chamber, Richard, and then all of the members that have taken the time out of their busy schedules to be available to provide their input to us here today and hear what we've also been doing in order to advocate on their behalf. So I'll turn it over to Pat now.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and it really is a pleasure to be here, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity. Thank you to everyone for supporting your local chamber. It's really important that we support these organizations that help give voice to the business community and give people opportunities like today to talk about local business issues. And I've got to know Mel since we were both elected in 2015. He's a great MP who is a really strong voice both within caucus and outside caucus for the issues of Vernon and the North Okanagan and Shuswap areas. So real pleasure to be here today with Mel. As the shadow minister for small business, I spend a lot of time talking to business organizations across Canada, and so I'm really happy to be able to do that today with you. The small businesses really are the they're the backbone of the Canadian economy. They're the heart and soul of our communities, and they're taking the brunt of COVID. I mean, I've the people I've spoken to right across Canada, the issues are very similar as far as COVID related challenges, and I don't think it can be overstated just how tough COVID has been on the small business operator especially. So I'm the vice chair of the finance committee, and we have just finished making our recommendations for the upcoming budget. There's been a staggering amount of public spending that's gone on. There are enormous support programs that are necessary when different orders of government order a business to close. There's an obligation to support these businesses, and we recognize that. But we have absolutely got to get back to an employment-based economy. It's simply untenable to continue the way we've had to. So we need a safe reopening of the economy to get our businesses back up and functioning.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. We'll get right into the questions here. I just want to remind our attendees that if you do have a question that you'd like to ask MP Kelly or MP Arnold, that you can submit those in the Q&A box, and we will ask them on your behalf. So we'll get right into it. So with Canada relying on out-of-country sources for COVID-19 vaccine, what can be done to create domestic production, not only for this pandemic, but for the future? And I'll leave
Thanks,
that
Dan. I'll start off, and then I can pass it off to Pat in a second. The current government left Canadian vaccine manufacturers behind when they sought out procurement of vaccines. We know we have the technology to develop vaccines. The Providence Medical Group in Alberta has one that's waiting for approval. There's another, and there's a plant being set up in Quebec to produce the vaccines. And Canada has been a forefront at developing vaccines. We were a key player in the development of the Ebola vaccine a few years ago. So we have the intellectual and technical capacity, but something that's also needed is the base products that go into these vaccines. It's an interesting fact that egg products are used in the manufacture of vaccines. And so I've been communicating with a farm here in the North Okanagan Shuswap that is trying to increase their capacity. They need financing and so on in order to be able to expand their operations so that they can tie into the supply chain that's needed. And I think it's a more complicated process than just building a factory to actually manufacture the vaccines. There's an entire chain that goes into that process. We have to be looking at that entire chain if we're going to be effective and efficient in producing vaccines here in Canada.
Yeah, there are some really important lessons that must be learned from this experience when it comes to the I guess part of the question dealing with future pandemics. I mean, there will not be mass production of vaccine in Canada in time to really be meaningful in this pandemic, and that ship really unfortunately sailed, and it began to sail not long after the pandemic began. The CanSino agreement that the government had sought really was a significant factor in Canada being passed over by the other international manufacturers that had the most promising vaccines. Mel mentioned the Providence, which is based in Calgary. They sought a fairly nominal amount of finance from the federal government back in May, and they had and have a promising vaccine, but it had languished in absence of investment. And they literally didn't get a response for months, and it was really a significant missed opportunity. And we've just got to, as a country, ensure that we don't ever be put in this position again in the future.
Hey, thank you both for that. So what measures would you take so small business owners not only survive the pandemic, but thrive?
Thanks, Dan. Another great question. And I think the first thing is to hear from small businesses through events like this today, phone calls, emails, making sure that we listen to those businesses to find out what it is they need to thrive and survive, rather than a program that's pushed out by Ottawa bureaucrats, that it's a one size tries to fit all and doesn't. So the key thing I think is to listen to small businesses like the chamber members and find out what it is they need. Do they need wage subsidies? Do they need loan interest rate reductions? What are the key things that are going to make a difference to be able to have them survive? And then once we have that, take that back to Ottawa and make sure that we get that implemented in the programs, the legislation, and the regulation that comes out of Ottawa. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a question, that really has two, I think, distinct parts to it. I mean, what about survival and thriving? A business that is ordered to close by either a municipal or a provincial health order isn't going to thrive. It's a question of ensuring that they can survive and be put in a position where they can thrive once the economy is safely reopened. And there were programs that were, had to be invented very quickly. I mean, let's certainly don't take anything away from the extraordinary pressure on the government to invent programs very quickly, but there were many holes in the aid programs that the government launched last spring. And Mel and I and a number of our colleagues, we spent a lot of time in the spring and summer just trying to get the government to make, in some cases, small changes, but critical ones that had left a number of small businesses behind. Things like businesses that bank with a credit union that couldn't access the SEBA program. Things like the rent subsidy program that really didn't help anybody because it was based on, actually, it's pretty close to nobody though. The criteria was really structured around landlords and the necessity of a commercial mortgage on the building, and a number of criteria that really didn't seem to make any sense. So we have worked with the other parties, we worked with the other opposition parties, we worked with the government, and we're able to make major changes to a number of these programs to ensure our small businesses can survive. But for small businesses to thrive, businesses need customers, not more loans to carry new debt into the recovery. So getting a safely reopened economy, I think, is really there's just no substitute for it, no way around it.
Yeah, certainly agree. On to the next question here. So other jurisdictions in the world have been very supportive of the aviation system and have provided direct grants to the industry. The US has provided $13 billion directly to airports, with another $8 billion on its way. So do you know why Kelowna International Airport has received no assistance?
As to the specifics of Kelowna International, it's just outside of my riding, down in my colleague Tracy Gray's riding. So I don't know the specifics around Kelowna International. Now that I've heard this question, I certainly will be reaching out to MP Gray to see how we can work together, because it's not just the airport operations itself that are so important here in the North Okanagan Shuswap. KF Aerospace, formerly known as Kelowna Flightcraft, they were doing 50% of WestJet's maintenance. If WestJet isn't flying planes, they don't need maintenance, so they don't need maintenance workers. So there's many jobs here in the North Okanagan Shuswap that are reliant on that airport, the operations that take place out of there. this government has been very slow to roll out any programs to support the aviation sector. We've been pressing them on that, and I think Pat Kelly will be able to provide a little more detail on that as well. But certainly there seems to be a bit of a stalemate taking place right now between government and the airline sector, and I certainly hope that Kelowna is able to continue operations, because some of the route cancellations that we've seen have actually resulted in flight services being deleted or not needed in some of these smaller regional airports, and it's certainly causing some concern for some of our colleagues. So, Pat, if you'd like to elaborate a little further.
Well, I don't have too much more, but we have asked and pleaded, I think, with the government to have an aviation industry strategy since the beginning. And we have Mel and I presume Mel, just as I have, am receiving dozens, maybe hundreds of emails from passengers that that don't get ticket refunds. So you've got people that have paid for tickets, and you've got the businesses though that are compelled to close, and there's not much appetite for yes, some want to see international travel reopened, and I know I think you've got a question about that too, but boy, it's going to be very tough for this industry for quite a while. Now, on the specific point about the Kelowna airport, the Calgary airport hasn't received any direct financial aid either, and that's one of the top hub airports in the country. I see Mel there all the time, trying to get through to Ottawa. So you've got these critical infrastructure pieces. You have the smaller regional airports where there's the threat of really not having any flights at all, and the larger hub airports that are expending money at enormous rates and are worried that they will be able to actually continue and fund necessary capital in the future because they're burning all of their cash right now. So it is a tough situation out there, but it's not unique for Kelowna. This is a national issue of how we sustain our air travel infrastructure every way you look at it.
Yeah, certainly a hurting industry that could use a lot of support. And we're all going to need them when this thing's over with, because we're going to want to hop on a plane and get out of here and go somewhere sunny. So yeah, for sure, important. I just want to remind everybody that if you have a question, you can submit it through the Q&A, and we'll make sure to ask it of both MP Arnold and MP Kelly. Given the number of deaths from the opioid crisis in our region, what steps does the federal government need to take to address this issue? And do you agree with the $3.5 million spent on opiate dispensing vending machines?
The opioid vending machines, I just saw that story this morning, so that's fairly new to me. We'll be certainly looking at that. So far, this government has talked a talk, but they haven't walked a walk with dealing with opioid or mental health issues. I'm proud to say, my good friend Todd Doherty from Caribou Prince George, initially he put forward a private member's bill to create a framework for PTSD in first responders or with first responders. The government hasn't acted on that. He's now been successful in getting unanimous support of the House of Commons to create a 911 suicide prevent or 988 suicide prevention hotline in Canada. The US will have one this year, but they haven't created or they haven't moved forward on that yet in Canada. But we did get unanimous support in the House. Mental health and opioid addictions, all drug addictions, are certainly becoming much more of a high profile for myself and members. We've seen the deaths here in BC, and it cannot be allowed to continue. The deaths from overdoses and opioid addictions is should be as important as the COVID-19 pandemic is. So will certainly be that, I believe, is going to be a bigger part of our platform moving forward as well. So Pat, I know you in a larger center like Calgary have probably seen this issue as well.
Yeah, I don't think that really this is an issue in communities of every size, and it may be there are some differences. I mean, every community is different, and part of the government's response to addiction is that each community is different, and that the reaction, some of the policy stuff that has maybe had its origins in the horrific East Vancouver crisis, or East End crisis. Those kinds of responses, the harm reduction and the or things carried out in the name of harm reduction don't always work well in different communities. Opioid addiction exists in my community, and there are deaths and tragedies in my community, but it's not as visible in terms of street level kind of what you would see just walking through the street. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and it's the same in a smaller city or a smaller town. Addiction has permeated through every sort of walk of life, socioeconomically and regionally, and the death tolls, I mean, are often compared, compare with the COVID deaths. It's the opioid deaths are quietly increasing and occurring in all of our communities, and there needs to be a better national strategy to deal with it. And I don't have those answers here, and I'm not here to, and I'm not able to give you my answer as far as what we should be doing, but we need to recognize that there are different needs in different communities, and we have to ensure that no community is left out of how we deal with the addiction crisis.
Hey, thank you both for that. I did see a question come in from one of our attendees, so I will read that out. So it says, do you foresee any challenges to business recovery that are unique and specific to Vernon in particular? And maybe that's more addressed to you, Mel.
Okay. Yeah, Pat may not know the particulars here at Vernon. I guess there's been a few things that have come up in common, just to it with queries here from the Vernon area, but also from chambers across the riding. Some of those are housing for staff, the interest costs, transportation, a number of pieces. I think Vernon, rather than focus on the challenges, I think we should focus on the opportunities that are out there. We have a year-round playground here. Tourism can be a big part of that. We did, I think, had a relatively respectable summer for our tourism operators here for the most part. There were certainly some that had some difficulties, but if we can get the travel restrictions lifted and the people moving about, not just here in BC, but across Canada, and bring in our international travelers, that'll help our tourism sector, which feeds much of our small business sector here. Other operations that are able to operate, whether people are working at home, they can continue to operate under these modified situations for a while. But the big thing, I think, is really getting vaccines or rapid testing, whatever it takes, to be able to allow people to move freely again, because we have so many opportunities here in the Greater Vernon area to bring in tourists, but also to bring in new business investment. And that'll be a big part of it as well, is to make sure that people feel confident enough to invest. Pat, maybe you've got a comment on the investment part of it that would apply not just here in Vernon, but across the region or across the country.
Yeah, I mean, well, there are a number of recommendations that we've made through the Finance Committee to the government about that will help with bring economic activity back, which really cuts across the country. I mean, we've asked that the government, and this is the the Conservative caucus on the Finance Committee. Please, absolutely no new taxes for Canadians. We can't. We've got businesses like many of the businesses. This is really, I'm sure, quite a big deal in the Okanagan. The alcohol excise escalator, where you have ever increasing excise, even without a vote in Parliament, on beer, wine, and spirits, all three of which are made in the Okanagan. So, we've sort of begged the government, back off on increasing the tax on the excise on alcohol, back off on the payroll increases that are kicking in for the increased Canada pension contribution, the increase on the carbon tax, which affects a variety of businesses. These are all built-in, automatically going taxes that are increasing this year. So we've really taken a strong view that there must not be new taxes imposed on businesses, and we really do need to work as effectively as we can to a safe reopening the economy, to get back to an employment-based economy. That's as true in Vernon as it would be in Newfoundland or any other part of the country, I think.
Thank you both. So you touched on taxes that affect our local distillers here. So I'll move into one that relates to that. So given the ability of craft distillers to create jobs across the country and support local agriculture, will the official opposition work with all other political parties to ensure there is excise parity with the U.S. so craft distillers can expand?
Well, thanks, Dan, and I want to thank Okanagan Spirits, the other distillers in the area, for the efforts that they took early on in the pandemic to make sure that our hospitals, our healthcare workers, and our first responders were supplied with hand sanitizers when they needed it most, when there was a shortage here in Canada. So that I just want to put that thank you out there right from the start, and recognize the efforts that they went through. On the excise tax, currently Canada is at about a 10-to-1 disadvantage, I believe it is, to the U.S. as far as excise tax on alcohol, and the rationale behind it hasn't been clear from this government, why they're putting it on there so heavily. And we can see the benefits from the information I've been provided, that reducing that excise tax to a parity with what the U.S. has not only increases the ability for the distillers to grow, but it's the agricultural sector that feeds into those distilleries that will also benefit from that. Canada has, this abundance of farmland, of agricultural opportunity, and feeding it into the distillers sector to make us more competitive. Right now, it's very difficult to sell Canadian products into the U.S. at any sort of a marketable price, or even compete here in Canada at a competitive price to what's coming in out of the U.S. So certainly, I'll be advocating for that. Our party has just recently passed or put forward a motion in the House and gained support for it to form a Canada-U.S. economic committee that will be looking at all aspects of Canada-U.S. trade relations and economic activity. And I'll make sure that the members on that committee are aware of this imparity that's taking place between Canada and the U.S. And hopefully we can get all parties in agreement on this to reduce that excise tax.
Yeah, the escalator is a part of this, and it just it really has bothered me from the beginning that when this first came in during the last Parliament, and no government should have the power to or should be able to raise taxes automatically without a vote in Parliament, and I think that is fundamental to our system. I think that goes right back to the time of King John and the very, very first Parliament and the Magna Carta, that you don't the government can't take from people without the agreement of its parliament, and to just automatically give more money every year to the crown is it's just not right, and I think each parliament should have to and be compelled to stand up and vote and be on the record to their constituents when they raise taxes.
Thank you both. So the Chamber has a few more prepared questions. I just want to remind the attendees that this is your opportunity to ask questions of MP Kelly and MP Arnold. So if you have any that you would like to get answered or addressed, please feel free to fill them in there. I think I did see one pop through, and it was from Tori Silverthorne. So she works in tourism in Vernon here. So for MP Pat Kelly, what role do you see the tourism sector playing in Western Canada's recovery?
Well, it's going to play a critical role, and I think and hope that that tourism might be an industry, especially in a place like Vernon, that is easily reachable by car from Calgary. Even if we that maybe you can see a big uptake in tourism services even before there is appetite for international travel. I think it's extremely important, and I'm in a city that has one of the largest summer festivals in North America, in the Calgary Stampede, and it would break my heart to see a second Stampede canceled. I'm also pretty close to Banff, which is entirely typically depends on the international tourist, but in the absence of international tourism, we hope for increased domestic tourism. So I think that it's important maybe for members of the Vernon Chamber who are in tourism to send a strong message that tourists from other parts of Canada are welcome when travel guidelines support that. I really hope that we are able to see a decent tourism season. I'm glad to hear from Mel that last summer wasn't maybe as bad as it could have been, and was all right. But it's I can't even imagine. We're going to need to see a recovery in tourism to have a general recovery.
Is there anything you wanted to add there, Mel?
Thanks, Dan. No, I think I touched base on this. It was more directed to Pat Kelly. So if we can cover a few more questions, I've sort of made some comments on the tourism part.
You bet. So I do have one directed for you, Mel. It says, what steps are you taking to ensure the federal government supports a grant application for a new cultural center in Greater Vernon?
Okay, thanks, Dan. I've been in contact with the executive director from the art gallery, who's heading up sort of some of the advocacy work on this piece. I've been provided and I've reviewed the 2016 Greater Vernon Cultural Plan and followed all of the processes there. The referendum 2.5 years ago that approved the borrowing of the money towards this $40 million project. And I've also been following the potential changes that may take place with this. I think the big thing here is that it's a local initiative, and once that final business plan is ready to go here at the local level, I'm certainly wanting and eager to be able to present that to the federal ministers in whatever government it is, whether it's current government or whether we face an election and a change by then. But I'll certainly be championing this project if this is what the city and the region want to move forward with in the future. I can see where it is a big not just cultural opportunity, but an economic opportunity for the community as well. So as soon as that local plan is ready to go, I'll be looking forward to putting it forward. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, MP Arnold. Many employers were experiencing difficulties recruiting or retaining staff prior to the pandemic. What steps would you take to recommend to improve this situation?
Great, thanks, Dan. As I mentioned, I've heard from chambers across the region on almost every sector, and staffing shortages were one of the biggest common challenges that they were facing. And those challenges were brought on by a multitude of factors, as I mentioned. Some of it was housing availability, the opportunity for spousal employment, high-speed internet access, payroll costs, transportation. And I believe we have to take action on multiple fronts at multiple levels of government working together. Often low-income workers will live in outlying areas where housing costs are lower, so they need public transportation possibly to get into where the jobs might be. So how can we work with transit, which is a provincial operation for the most part, to make sure that we can coordinate that? How can we provide opportunity for investment in housing at all levels of income, so that the housing is there? The high-speed internet access we have been pushing for constantly, and I think Pat will back me up on this, that we've been pushing hard for improved high-speed internet access. It's become so important during this pandemic with everyone working from home. It has put rural businesses and rural employees at a disadvantage, and we need to create equity for all employers and all employees in this area. So there's so many things that need to be done, but I think the biggest thing is working together collaboratively with all levels of government, so that we can improve employment opportunities, but also access to employees. I guess one of the disincentives that we saw was the way that the relief programs were rolled out, where a lot of people decided it was easier to stay home and collect their benefits rather than go back to work. So we worked to change some of that. I know early on in the pandemic, we pushed the government to have the student benefit program tied into the jobs bank, and now that is the case for the revised employment insurance program. So I'll leave it now to Pat to elaborate a little further if you like.
Okay, I don't think I'll add too much, but just I mean, Mel makes a good point of just how interconnected some of the obstacles to getting people able to participate in the workforce, or to get people physically where the work is. Some of the obstacles, I mean, look, businesses have, especially small businesses, have got tremendous costs imposed on them, in some cases by government. And we've talked about the tax increases that are coming, that do affect small businesses, right, and large businesses, and they ultimately affect a business's ability to invest in wages and employees, and it's all part of the general pressure that our businesses find themselves in. But there are in some cases where, yeah, if a business had the ability to offer perhaps higher wages, there would be an ability to get people that aren't participating in the workforce to do so, but or to be willing to travel further, or whatever the case may be. But this is a long-standing and difficult challenge for employers in a lot of different geographic areas, not completely across Canada, but in many parts of the country.
Yeah, thank you both. Do you support a restart strategy for testing and quarantine measures that allows for a phased reopening of international air travel and provides a clear path forward for the reopening of domestic travel?
Thanks, Dan. That's a great question, and one that we've certainly heard lots about over the past few weeks, especially with the mandatory quarantines that the government has put in place, the quarantine hotels, and so on. My office has been dealing with a lot of calls on this, and I'm sure Pat's has as well. We certainly would support a phased reopening. We need to get some way of increasing our ability to travel, whether that's even locally or here within BC, provincially or across the country or internationally, whether that is through vaccines or proof of tests, rapid testing. We have constantly pushed this government, the current government, to expand the rapid testing programs in order to free up our travel and economy, and yet they've failed to deliver on that. So we'll continue to push on that, because we see that as one way as well, and that is going to take the further collaboration with international travel. It's going to take work with our international partners as well, so that we have recognized standards from across different jurisdictions, different countries, so that a testing standard in one country is recognized in another. Some of this is going to take time, but I don't know if the current government has really started rolling out any sort of a plan or a strategy behind that, but certainly support it in a phased reopening however and as quickly as we can possibly make that happen. Yep. Pat?
Yeah, I think that's been criticism that many have leveled at the government all along here, is the absence of a strategy. I don't think that there is. We're not there yet in terms of even really, I think, support for the idea of fully open international travel. But we need to get there, and we need a strategy to get there. The inability to make proper widespread use of rapid results testing and screening has been really a real disappointment all the way along. And yes, a strategy. We need a strategy, and we've been asking the government to table a plan, for not just for the issue of international travel, but more broadly speaking, across the economy. And we really haven't had anything that I think anyone could say is a true plan to reopen really anything. So we there's no question we need a strategy.
Yeah, thank you both for that. Obviously, Canada's taken on a staggering amount of debt to help get us through this pandemic, and certainly our country isn't the only one dealing with that. But how do you see Canada, recovering through the amount of debt that we're taking on?
Yeah, that's a challenging one, Dan. We haven't been able to get this government to come up with a budget since March of 2019. We're now almost 2 years from that date. So it's been a challenge for us to hold them accountable for the incredible spending that they've created. About $400 billion, that's a B, in deficit. We certainly supported getting programs out that to help support people, businesses survive and be able to get through this pandemic. But there's been very little accountability from this government on that, and it's going to take some sound fiscal management, without cutting programs or anything like that. How are we going to encourage growth and investment in Canada? There is I think a large amount of dollars out there that it may be ready for investment, but we need to show that Canada is a good place to invest that money, invest in businesses or new businesses to make that growth happen. And probably the least painful way out of this will be through increased economic growth, and that's going to take a plan. Our conservative government led us out of the recession in 2007, 8, and 9, and kept Canada stronger than any of the other G7 countries. So we have the know-how, the experience at doing that. So we're hoping that there may be an election soon. We'll be putting forward platforms that will help us lead the way out of this pandemic for not just Canada, but for the small businesses and the people that are needing employment and security for their future. So, Pat, you want to add a little more?
Well, I mean, that's somewhat covers it. I mean, we look, we have to get to a growth economy, an employment-based economy. There just is not, we can't, right now is not the time to embark on giant, large, permanent public expenditure programs. We just can't do it. We need to get people back to work. We need the economy to grow so that we can return and restore the enormous chunk of our GDP that disappeared during the pandemic. Until we get the public finances under control, there just is no way to start creating large new permanent spending programs. And there's no room or appetite, or there's just no room in the economy for significant new taxes. There's no way we would ever be able to attract the investment we need. We need to get people. We need to get people back to work at real jobs, producing real goods and services and products that people need, and really get back to an employment-based economy.
I'll just quickly add that, one thing I have heard, and I maybe Pat has heard the same thing, is that small businesses don't want to incur further debt during this time. There have been loan programs offered and so on, but small businesses they want security for their future before they take on further debt load. And I think that should be a good basically a good mindset for all Canadians, is let's make sure we have some security before we just continue spending recklessly the way we have over the past year.
Yeah, this is the critical fear within for the small business sector, is just the businesses burning capital, incurring debt, and being undercapitalized and able to actually grow and take it and benefit from economic activity that's pent up demand that might exist following the pandemic. The average small business across Canada has taken on $170,000 in debt since COVID began. That's the average. And many of these, so this is survival. In many cases, what businesses undertaken to do just to survive, just to keep the lights on, just to continue operating. But that catches up eventually, and most of these businesses say this will interfere with the operation of their business going forward. So, this crisis cannot be entirely just borrowed. It's way out of. We really need to see real growth in the economy, and give households, businesses, and governments the ability to be able to service and repay their debts over time.
And Pat, you're a few years younger than I am, and probably most of our listeners are as well. But I remember working through the recession of '81, and then the interest rates, what happened then. And our interest rates are low right now, so we can afford this borrowing short term, but we don't know what it's going to do long term. And the current government has done most of the borrowing for these deficits on short term terms. So if we see a 1 or even 0.5% or a 1% or 2% bump in increase, it's putting us at incredible risk. Businesses, I think, see that. I recall my first mortgage was at 9.5%, and second mortgage was at as part of that first home purchase was at 12%. Some people can't even imagine that even being possible, but that's what we paid, and we bought after the high pressure run of some paying 19, 20, and 21%. So it's a huge risk. Businesses don't want to take on that debt risk right now, and I credit businesses that have recognized that and resisted the opportunity to borrow at low rates right now.
Thank you both for that. So we're getting close to our time. I don't see any more questions from our attendees, so I'll give you both the opportunity for a closing statement. we'll start with you, MP Arnold.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Again, thank you to the Chamber and all of those that are participating today. Some great questions. I think we also got to all the ones that you had pre-submitted, and then there's the Q&A online. Certainly, if anybody has any other questions or concerns for their business or their employees, that's what my office is here for, is to assist with any of the federal programs that are rolled out. We're certainly taking lots of calls on that. Lots of individuals and businesses that have either fallen through the cracks. We are trying to find ways to help people whenever and wherever we can. So I just wanted to continue to offer that out there to the members and the businesses and their employees. If it's a federal program with some challenges, we'll look for an answer if we can. May not always be able to provide it, but we're certainly here to help if we can. And maybe in my closing, I'd just like to say thank you for all of the businesses in the Greater Vernon area that have dug in so hard over the past few months, just to make sure their customers are provided service and to make sure that our spirits are kept as high as they can be here in the North Okanagan Shuswap. It's an honor to be here, an honor to serve them, and it's just a great place in Canada. So thanks again, everyone.
Yeah, well, and I agree, and I hope that I'm able to get out there and visit sometime soon. I've visited all the, well, both the North Okanagan and the Shuswap many times over the years, and can't really hope to be able to do so again soon, and support some of the local businesses that support and welcome tourists from across Canada, but and certainly a heck of a lot of them from my city. So it was a real pleasure to be here. I really enjoy meetings with the chambers from the smaller and medium-sized cities, where you really get to hear a bit about what's going on the ground, and what local businesses in various communities are facing. And so it's a great opportunity, and support your local chamber. So thank you to you, Dan, and Mel. It was a real pleasure to do this with you both.
Well, thank you. And on behalf of the Greater Vernon Chamber, I want to extend a huge thank you to both of you for being available today to answer questions of our members. And obviously the Chamber is really proud to be able to serve our members and offer these types of events that can connect you both and have their issues addressed. So thank you again, both of you, and we'll let you get on with the remainder of your day, and appreciate your time. Until next time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Take care, everyone.